All right, everybody, let me just get started. Obviously, for the first time out, I forgot to turn on the iPad for the music, but here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Stigma-Free Society's Facebook Live, YouTube Live with Daniel Toe. We've renamed it Lunch and Learn because it's lunchtime and we're all going to learn together. So I'm so glad to be on the Stigma Free, broadcasting live to you from the Surrey School District. Um, just wait for some viewers to come, or if no viewers come, we will just have you watch later, and that's totally okay. But we are broadcasting live right now, and this is in Jeff Speed, giving some credit to the musician that we're listening to. So good. So as viewers come on, we're just going to wait a couple seconds and I will slowly fade out the music. My wife told me that I should fade out music instead of just like ending it. So I faded it out. So listening to the spouse there, it's really important. And today we are so glad to have Vanessa Chu with us. And this is my contact information, but we'll go back to that in a minute. As you all know, I am a district principal in the Surrey School District. Those things that I say represent the school district as well as the Stigma-Free Society. We're so happy to partner with. And today, to kick off September, we have Vanessa Chu, who's been on here before. She's been on with on this show when it was called Don't Just Survive, Thrive. Now it's called Lunch and Learn. But also, she's been on with the Stigma-Free Society herself. This is all of her information. She is, I'm just going to look at this screen because my screen here is too small. But that's her website, her coaching website. And we just added this, that you can contact her directly by going to Instagram, if you all have Instagram, and going to the messaging on Instagram. And that's a more direct way to contact her. Please listen to her, I think 46 episodes now, Vanessa? You have 46?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, see, I'm
That's
listening.
right.
46 episodes on her podcast. Some of them are short, and you can do it while you're brushing your teeth. You listen to Vanessa, and some of them she has some recently a few longer ones, including one of the broadcasts we had here. It's also on her podcast. So please listen to her podcast. Check it out. She has a lot of really great, interesting insights on life and how to just improve yourself as you are living life and going through struggles yourself. She's gone through a lot of those struggles, and she definitely has really great advice. She touches on everything from relationships to like time management, I think, and to conquering fears, which is what we are going to be talking about today. So Vanessa, are you ready? I'm just going to take this screen off because apparently you can't see anything when we have this. Is this better?
Yeah, that's good. You're
like
just
like
really small, but I can see you.
I'm really small. How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, that's good.
Really?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, but you can't see the art, but that's okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Cool, Vanessa. So before we ask you the questions that I've laid out in the email, and we often deviate from the questions anyways, but just tell us a little bit about what's going on with you recently. Like, what have you been up to? I haven't talked to you. I've talked to you, but not live here for about almost 6 months, 7 months. What's new with you?
Well, still working on my business as always. I like to tell my friends with kids that my business is my baby.
Yeah.
I am nurturing it in its first year. I'm growing it. I'm developing it just like you would a child, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And just always working on it constantly and seeing, how I can grow it with the help of my business coach and my other coaches that I'm working with right now. And then also working steadily, in radio still as a radio host here in Vancouver, and also doing a little bit of comedy writing on the side and hoping to get back into a little bit of that and into improv. Just doing some acting and voice acting on the side.
Cool. That's awesome. I'm seeing some Wi-Fi issues on your end. So I made the screen a bit smaller because your picture was a little bit fuzzy.
Okay.
So as if it clears up, hopefully then I'll make it bigger again. But I want everyone to see us in full HD. So I wanted to make sure everything looks good and our voices and faces and stuff match up. So today we are talking about conquering fear. And all of us, I think we're hearing on the news about vaccine cards, otherwise known as passports, but they're not using that language anymore. Yesterday I went to a meeting in a restaurant and it was my very first time scanning, and it's super easy, super fun. But with things like that, and with COVID numbers still being sort of leveled out but high compared to this time last year, there is a lot of fear with kids going back to school, people going back into the office. Just many different changes. Again, we've had 2 years of basically quasi isolation. Not as bad as some provinces, but in BC, people still felt it. Was quasi isolation. And in many of your podcasts, you talk about confidence, you talk about silencing one's own critics, you talk about breaking negative thought patterns and overcoming grief and all these things, and much of which is your focus as a coach. But when I listen to your podcast, most recently, one of the threads I see, and you nailed it in I think your very last episode you just did, about conquering fear. I think your thing is making friends with fear, even though it can be a mother, shouldn't swear on
a mother effer. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're still living in a global pandemic, and quite honestly, there's never been so much fear around us. What does it mean to you to conquer fear? What does that mean, given the current state of our world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to use the phrase, like in my latest podcast episode, making friends with fear. Yeah. And it's understanding it and leaning into it and embracing it. So I think with the pandemic, with the global pandemic, which is obviously it's affected everyone, right, in the last 2 years, in early and mid 2020, when everything was like shut down and we didn't know enough information about COVID and everyone was still like, what's going on? I was very scared. And seeing the numbers go up and the death toll and just the infection rates go up every day, like all around the world, it was scary, right? Yeah. So I basically just hunkered down with my parents and didn't see anyone, didn't go out, like followed the rules, was super strict about cleaning things and all that stuff. And I realized that I can't control or know what COVID does or who it's going to infect next. And worrying about that won't change the fact that we're in a global pandemic, right? Yeah. I won't be able to manage my own fears if I'm worrying about what everybody else is doing, because I can't control anybody else's actions or behaviors, right? Yeah. But what I can do is be mindful of my own actions and be as safe as possible if and when I have contact with people, if I'm out. Because I don't want to contract anything and not know if I'm spreading it around, right? Yeah. I certainly don't want any more of our vulnerable population to get infected, and just thinking about the frontline workers and the healthcare workers who have gone through. I can't even imagine, right? Yeah. Like I'm not there. They're the ones who are having to deal with this on a daily basis, right? So, it's just being mindful of my own actions and knowing how that can affect other people down the line, especially in this pandemic that's shaken our entire world.
Yeah, and there is a lot of fear out there. Actually, funny you brought that story about you hunkering down with your parents. Your brother, just so for people know, her brother's also my dentist. Actually, her dad technically is my dentist, but her brother is there as well. And when I was talking to Sean, and shout out to Sean Chu, how you doing? Loft 19 Dental. They're not sponsoring this, but I thought I'd just give your brother a shout out. He's a great dentist. He actually said, you hunkered down with your parents, and he actually chose to stay away, or you kept him away. I'm not going to say which. He chose to stay away because he sees patients. He's there all the time, and he's already there with your dad, and your dad's super safe. Your dad has a mask, full shield, but he only works a couple days a week. So your brother said, I'm just not really going to see them. I'll see dad at work, and just that you want to keep everyone safe, and your mom doesn't really go out, and so even within your own family, you folks as a family chose to keep others safe. Now, when you make those choices, for you, and maybe in what you saw the people, does that make you more afraid or less afraid? And is that really conquering fear? Because I found that some folks, when you're so almost like living in a paranoia, like, we will do this and we can't do this and we try to do this, and it almost generates fear, and it almost is a cycle, right? A self-perpetuation of fear. And you talk a lot about that in your coaching and on your podcast about you're feeding itself, right? Your actions actually feed your own inability sometimes. Can you talk a little bit about that and how to overcome that, because you've gone through it, you've talked about it, and share a little bit with our audience on how you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tricky one because there are always going to be fears that pop up in our lives in whatever situation that we might come across, right? Or whatever opportunities that arise in our lives. And the thing that really helped me is that I'm still doing on a regular basis, that I also have like a couple of tips later on if you'd like me to share those. But
Please,
it's just making sure that I am being present, because when we are so engulfed in our fears, we tend to worry about the future a lot. And then those things replay, and then we're not like focusing on what's happening right now or what I can do right now to help anything, right? And then a lot of those fears too are just fears about our own, personal, like our self-limiting beliefs and stuff like that too, right? And I've come to learn over, the last year of just me learning so much and being coached while I am coaching, is that we are very addicted to those fears and those anxious thoughts.
What do you mean?
And then they tend to just, like, the more we think about them, it's like you go down the rabbit hole of like, just, it snowballs, right? It's a snowball effect of like making it bigger and bigger. And then the more we think about it, we're like blowing things out of proportion, right? Like, it's so easy to just like make things bigger than they are. But in the case of, talking about this global pandemic, obviously, like, I'm thinking about how my actions may affect other people, like my brother, not seeing my parents for a little bit because he's seeing patients as well, right? And then it's like, and my parents are in the generation where they're more vulnerable than we are. So it's not to say like not to be safe, obviously, in this while we're still in it all together. But I just find that we can hang on to those fears and those anxieties that we have.
You mentioned the word addiction, and how is fear, like, fear and addiction? Because I find that so interesting, because it is like it's almost like a perpetual, like it's almost like soothing to be paranoid. Do you know what I mean? And afraid. Like, maybe you can go more into that. Why do you feel that it's an addiction?
Yeah, I think it's because we normalize it after, right? We think we're just gonna keep worrying about things, and because we perhaps might not be mindful that or aware that we are perpetuating those thoughts, and they're just replaying in our minds, our fears in our heads, and then we just think it's like a normal part of our lives. Like, this is just how it is, but it's not, right? Like, we can choose to reframe things or see things in a different perspective, and it's knowing that we have that choice to stop our thoughts. Like, I talk a lot about stopping negative self-talk and stuff like that, and all the inner critic work that I've been doing and talking about. It's the language that we're using in our heads, and what are those things saying? Like, are those things the absolute truth, or are they distorted?
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of this distortion in them. I'll go back to my questions so I don't forget about them. And folks, if you are online and you do have a question, you can ask it in the chat, and we can try and address it, or we can just keep talking, and it's totally fine too. And it is, sometimes fear comes from a lack of information, or maybe too much. Like, how do we find that healthy balance to find, because we're just inundated, like, with the internet. You can and we did talk about this, I think, the very first time we talked about, like, scrolling and not scrolling, but the information is still there. We have so much, especially with the vaccine cards that we now have. There's so much out there. How do we decide what the healthy balance is? And that will lead to my next question: is, you talk about making friends with fear. How do you even do that? Like, why do you want that? Right? Why do you want that? It's a mother effer, right? Why do you want that?
Yeah. So with your question about finding a healthy balance, a lot of what we do every day is a habit. I have a habit of checking my phone, like, I don't know, every 10 minutes or something, every 15 minutes. Sure. I don't know.
Well, you're in media. You have to. Yeah.
But do I though? Do I have to? So like whenever I'm working from home, I intentionally put my phone in another room so I can't
Oh,
see it. Right.
okay.
And sometimes I even put it in airplane mode.
Oh,
I was someone who checked my phone constantly in 2020, just like the news. And I was like, I must stay updated. I have to know everything and all the information. I have to be informed, right?
yeah.
But near the end of last year in 2020, I decided to turn off all of my news and informational um, notifications, and I stopped listening to news podcasts.
Okay.
I stopped watching the news every day. And at first, it was really difficult because it was a habit of mine to just like scroll on my phone in the morning or, throughout
Yeah.
the day or at
Yeah.
night. Um, and it was so ingrained in me to do those things and to check
Yeah.
the news.
Yeah.
So I was filling my head with how many deaths there were in whatever country
Mm.
and what the numbers were, and what the regulations were that were in place, if there were any changes, like all of that stuff, or what I needed to do to keep others and myself safe, right?
Yeah.
And I now I ask myself, before like doom scrolling,
Doom scrolling. Yeah.
is this something that I need to do or do I want to do it? Because as soon as I turned off all of those notifications, my mental and emotional health improved so much more.
Is that
And
right?
yes, yeah, absolutely. And I really feel like what we want to do isn't always what we need.
Mm.
I don't need to spend 12 hours a day checking the news. I don't
Yeah.
need to do that. Now I only check it maybe a few times a week.
Oh,
And I mean, it's different for everybody what your balance or what your boundaries are. Like you can only decide that for yourself, right?
yeah.
But for me, like I like to know just enough of the information of what's going on. I if I if I find myself getting angry or upset over other people's decisions of what to do or
Yeah.
what not to do,
Yeah.
that's when I step away because I cannot control anybody else. I can only control my own actions, right? So I'm gonna still be as safe as I can
Yeah.
when I go out and if I have contact with people. And again, like only when is too much information and an overload for you, right?
Yes.
There's no like rule book saying like you should only check your phone once every hour or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I definitely think like I would say notice how it's affecting your thoughts and behaviors and if it's causing you to go down this spiral of worrying about the future because that takes you away from the present, right?
Yeah. So what is it? Is that like you talk about making friends with fear, and it seems that the way that you do that is find a balance that works for you. Can you elaborate on that? Like, 'cause again, it's not just fear of this, but we talk about like it's not just fear of COVID. We talk about COVID, I think, ad nauseum only because we're in it, right?
Yeah.
But there's like people have a fear of going back to the office now.
Yeah.
People have a fear of interacting with other people. People have a fear of, oh, if I work from home a day, am I going to be judged? There's lots of other fears that have now come out of. Now we're almost not post-COVID, but we're in a different world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I go to a Canucks game? Do I do
Yeah.
these things? And like, how do you make friends? Like, what does it mean to you? And I know you podcasted about it, so this would be like a 3-minute thing of your podcast. I encourage people to listen to it. But what does that mean to make friends with fear to you?
Yeah.
And how have you
So
done it? How have you done it?
so I think to your point about people having a fear about going back to the office and like going out to eat in restaurants and stuff like that. Like I've been working in my office or the station
Yeah.
the whole time, right? Like
Yep.
but I work during the days of the week where there are not very many people in the office. So and
Yeah.
I'm in by myself in a studio, so I don't ever have contact with people.
Yeah.
But I think like in public, I'm still very considerate of what other people's boundaries are because everybody's comfort level is going to be different, regardless of what the rules and regulations are of whether we can go to the mall, which we can, right? But yeah, I'm very aware that we all have our different comfort levels with how close we're standing to people and all that stuff, right? Yeah, with making friends with fear, I think I like to focus on, listening to our fears and understanding it. Because if we're not listening to our fears, again, we're just going to go down that rabbit hole of it's going to grow bigger and bigger, right? And then we feel like we can't do anything about it when I think that we can. So it's understanding where those fears are coming from, and how can we use our fears to our advantage. When we lean into our fears and we, I'll say, embrace our fears, we can see like where our needs are coming from, like what information are our fears telling us. And I think we don't think about leaning into our fears to know like how it can help us, right? Because I think, in the past I would just be like, oh well, fear is bad because it's just like it's making you like worked up and it's making you stressed out, and then you feel it in your body and then you're internalized, right? It's just like it affects everything, right? In your thought process and your behaviors and actions and everything. But if the better way, instead of reacting to our fears, is responding to it. And how can we respond to it if we're not actively listening or understanding where those fears are coming from, right? So it's acknowledging and accepting that fear is there and we have that fear there, but not judging it, because once we judge it, then again we're gonna go down this loophole of, oh my God, why am I feeling this way? Like I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be feeling this way. So not judging it, but understanding that fear is there in our lives to protect us. Like it wants to keep us safe from harm, but not letting it control every aspect of your life and not making decisions out of fear.
Okay. Well, we do have only about 5 minutes left, but let's talk about tips. You mentioned earlier that there are some tips that you might have, and that is actually my next question. A lot of anxiety and fears related to self-care and proper self-care, not just like self-medication, proper self-care, right? So any tips? Like you said, you had some tips about conquering fear and releasing that some anxiety. Any tips from you that you do go more deeper into when you do coach someone? But any tips for our general audience today?
Well, self-care has been such a huge thing in my life in the last year, and it really has helped me manage all the challenges and struggles that I've gone through personally and professionally. But meditation is a huge one for me. Deep breathing exercises as well. Journaling, everything. I journal about everything. My emotions, thoughts, feelings, triggers, like everything.
So you can look back on it. Is that why you journal? Like why?
Because then then it allows me to see patterns that I'm falling into, and then if I'm having fears and anxieties pop up again, then I can go back and be like, oh, look, there is a similarity between these things, and maybe it's not that particular situation, but it's something in my past that's triggered, fears and anxieties in that way in the present. So I would say those are a few core things that I actually must do every day, or else I feel a little bit thrown off. And then it also helps me stay mindful of my own actions and behaviors, and also be present, which is something that I've been working on a lot. I would say if you can visualize the worst case scenario with whatever your fears are, you can visualize the best. And that's something that I've always been working on as well in the last year. I tend to think of the worst case scenario because I'm just so used to it. It's ingrained in me. But I know we talked about this in the past too, that visualizing success is a really powerful practice. and it can really take you to that next step of moving forward in your life through your grief and through your loss and through your fears and anxieties or whatever it may be. But like why not visualize things going really well and awesome for you in whatever situations?
Yeah, and those are great tips. I actually like a lot of what you said about the tips of journaling and looking back, because that's really what trauma informed practice is about. But you're talking about it from your own personal perspective, right? Looking at what has happened to you, and it may be actually informing your actions now, and you don't even know it, right?
Yeah.
But by journaling and by keeping, or at the very least keeping track, there's a lot of apps that you can use to keep track, journal online rather than journaling on paper. Although you do paper, right? I'm assuming you do paper. You have.
I journal on my laptop because I type so much faster than I write.
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, like, you don't use an app. You type on Word or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we only have another few minutes, so I'm going to go back to your work, because I want you to get a little bit of time to talk, because you do talk about journaling, you talk about all of these things, and you do coach as well, and help people through a lot of what we talked about in like 20 minutes today, how to process some of the past and how to process some of the fears and context of the present, so you can have a better future. So maybe just spend the last 2 minutes talking about your work and how to contact you and what it is that you do for everybody out there who needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. I with my coaching, I focus primarily on grief and loss. But a lot of that too is a lot of mindset work, which you obviously know I love to talk about on my podcast. Yeah. And it's, I will say that, no coach out there has reached like the Mount Everest of knowing all there is to know about mindset, right? Like it's always working and growing, and we're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I will say that the experiences that I've gone through and the work that I've done in my own life and my inner soul work and that inner work that I've done has been so life-changing for me. So I will say that you don't need to face your fears alone. And I think some people feel like they do. There's no shame in asking for help or admitting that you might need some support or encouragement along the way. And I always say that asking for help is a way for you to get to where you want to be faster.
Absolutely.
I just like, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help if you need it. My info is up there, vanessachew.com. You can find me on Instagram at vanessachew21. And my podcast, it's called A Journey with Vanessa Chew.
Awesome. Yeah. And please listen. There's lots of short episodes, or if you're I do actually listen to you while I'm cleaning sometimes, because
it's good, like background, like, yeah.
No, it's not background. While I'm cleaning, I'm not talking about vacuuming. I'm talking about but I actually listen to a lot of talks while I'm doing chores. I can learn while doing something else. Instead of being bored washing dishes, I can learn something and wash dishes. So it is really great. She has a wonderful podcast. It's really engaging, super fun. And some things are really heartfelt. Like, actually, a lot of it is your own personal stories and heartfelt. And I encourage people to check it out. You can check it out you can see it on the screen, and please take time to contact Vanessa, look at her site. You can listen to her also on, I want to say it right because I always say your call sign is wrong, 93.7 JR Country, right? Is that how they say it? Instead of the FM in front or whatever. You say it because you say it every weekend.
93.7 JR Country.
There you go. There's no point in there, apparently. I'm from the 80s. Okay, so there you go. There's Vanessa, and I'm so glad to have you on here. She is a wonderful guest. We talked about her kicking off the broadcast for this year, and she so graciously agreed to do it. Thank you so much. Here is my information as well. Contact me at the school district, my cell number, my Twitter, my own personal blog as well, which we'll update later, and as well as the website. So you want to contact me at all in the district? I'm going to try and look at the music again. I really got to have this stuff like set up somehow. I need like an assistant just to set up the music, so I'm not like looking at an iPad during. But please contact me. This has been the Stigma-Free Society's broadcast. It's no longer Don't Just Survive, Thrive, although it's important that you do that. It is Lunch and Learn. Thank you for having lunch with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again. If you're watching later, I hope you're eating something, because the people who watched while we were doing this were eating their lunch. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you, Vanessa. Don't leave. Vanessa, don't leave. Okay, I'm just going to end the broadcast. Okay, bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day after lunch.